if Cindy is on plane 2. That's possible, but no, I wouldn't. Sorry, there's a crazy man who's staring at me do this. And to be honest, maybe he's the normal man and I'm the crazy one because I'm here doing LSAT at the lake. Hello, and welcome to my lake office. Got a wonderful view of the lake, and I wanted to knock out some LSAT games. So let's finish up Prep Test 3. I am looking, hopefully you can see, presuming I've set up this recording correctly. I am looking at the 4th game from Prep Test 3. This is still the December 1991 LSAT, and it's been a pretty easy section so far. The first game, I guess this one wasn't necessarily super easy as I look at it now, but I don't remember it taking a very long time. Second and third games, yeah, again, I wouldn't say any of these have been particularly difficult. Basically, I think it's been a roughly average to easy game section so far. We've only got, oh, I remember what it was. So I don't think that the games were necessarily super easy, but we had so many questions. And so we were doing really well in terms of our efficiency working through the section. So here we find ourselves, we've already answered 19 questions on the first 3 games. We have, I believe, the shortest game in this section, just 5 questions here. And again, could be a little bit harder than the others. I don't know. We'll just have to see right now. Let's go ahead and jump into it and find out. Planes 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I'm reading our setup. Planes 1, 2, 3, and 4, and no others, are available to fly in an air show. Pilots Anna, Bob, and Cindy are all aboard planes that are flying in the show, and they are the only qualified pilots in the show. Wait, are there some unqualified pilots? I don't know. This game's getting scary. All right, well, I mean, immediately, I'm presuming this is going to be a 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of setup. So I think that's what I'm going to try. 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe my elements are coming up in the clues this time instead. That does happen from time to time. I see A, B, and C. Oh, I've got pilots and co-pilots. So then D, E, and F are my co-pilots. I think that's it as far as the setup goes. So let's go ahead and symbolize these clues. Pilots A, B, and C are all aboard planes that are flying in the show, and they are the only qualified pilots in the show. Okay, so that's really just telling us elements. There's no clue going on there. Co-pilots D, E, and F are all aboard planes that are flying in the show, and they are the only qualified co-pilots in the show. So again, the key here really is just pilots versus co-pilots. And you can see I'm going with a uppercase for the pilots and lowercase for the co-pilots. No plane flies in the show. No plane flies in the show. No one but qualified pilots and qualified co-pilots flies in the show. So what I'm wondering now is, should I set this up as an in and out game instead? So an in and out game is a special kind of grouping game. I think I've done one already, but I'll have to go back and check. If I do, I'll put it up in the corner here so you can see it. It's a special kind of grouping game where you're either in or you're out. So in this case, the fact that either you get to fly the plane in the show or you don't, if you don't have a qualified pilot aboard, makes me think it's kind of an in and out game. But we are also deciding which pilots fly which planes. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add on an element. I'm going to say X, and X means that plane doesn't have a qualified pilot in it and therefore is not going to be in the show. But I don't think I'm otherwise going to change the structure here. I'm going to keep it 1, 2, 3, and 4. Or I'm going to try that anyway. We'll see how it goes. No one but qualified pilots and qualified co-pilots flies in the show, so I don't need to worry about any elements other than A, B, C, and D, E, F. Anna will fly only in either plane 1 or 4, so I'm going to put that, I could symbolize that A equals 1/4, but anywhere you're using mathematical symbols, we typically want to try and get that right on the diagram. So A is either first or fourth, and then D will only fly in either plane 2 or 3. So D is 2 or 3, D equals 2 or 3. And one deduction that leads me to right away is that A and D never fly together, right? That's impossible. Is there anything else we can say? I don't know where B and C go. Don't know where E and F go. I don't think so. I think we just need to jump into the questions. Fortunately, it looks like all 5 of these questions are specific questions. So let's take a look at number 20. If Anna flies plane 4 and Dave flies plane 2, which of the following must be true? Gosh, that doesn't really seem like much to go on. I'm wondering if we know for sure that there has to be some pilot in plane 2. So the idea is if a co-pilot is there, definitely a pilot will be with them, and then that plane is in the show. Oh, yes, and that is true. Okay, so it says they're all aboard planes that are flying in the show. So I don't know if I can write that down as a deduction, but if we put a co-pilot somewhere, they must be paired with a pilot, and that plane will be in the show. So what that means is that 2 cannot be the X right now. So either 1 does not fly or 3 does not fly, but definitely 2 and 4 are going to fly. Can I figure out who goes where, though? I mean, we can say either E or F are the co-pilots for the 2 other planes, whichever the 2 are that fly. So that's either 3 and 4 or it's 1 and 4. And similarly, we can say either B or C will be the pilots of those 2 planes as well. So, but again, it just doesn't feel like I have very much information. I think that's all we can say. C flies either plane 1 or plane 3. Gosh, I feel like that's the answer. And again, the habit we want to be in is once we found the answer, we move on. Being that this is a must be true and it's the very first question in the game, I might briefly check the other answer choices. And I wouldn't necessarily think of this as wasted time because it's going to help me think through how the game works and if maybe I've missed any deductions. If Cindy flies in plane 3, Bob flies in plane 2. See, I think that's true also, isn't it? Because someone has to fly. Oh, wait, I messed up the numbers. Okay, see, I'm glad we kept looking. It's not that Cindy is 1 or 3. Cindy was either 2 or 3 or 1 or 2. So actually, I wonder if the way they wrote this question, they kind of meant to catch people here. C could go 1 or 3 in different scenarios, but again, C could also go 2. So that's actually not a must be true. However, if Cindy flies plane 3, then Bob flies plane 2, yes, that is our must be true. And again, if you wanted to keep checking just to make sure, notice C, Bob and one other person fly plane 1. It's possible, right? That's what's going on here, but it's definitely not a must be true. If Bob is aboard plane 4, well, that's not even possible. If Cindy is in plane 2, then Bob flies plane 3? Not necessarily, because he could fly plane 1 instead. All right, so number 20, B. Very confident about that one. 21. If Bob and Anna fly on the same plane, which one of the following must be true? Oh my gosh. I don't know what is going on. I just keep falling places and the lake is gone. This is very disturbing. All right, gosh, where were we? If Bob and Anna fly on the same plane, which one of the following must be true? Okay, so this is interesting. So this means that pilots, not just pilot and co-pilot, can fly together. And it also means that we can have more than 2 people flying in a given plane. In fact, we're going to have to if everybody flies, which is what the directions said up here. Everybody is aboard a plane that flies in the show. We know, of course, that A has to be 1 or 4. So if A and B are together, they're going to have to be together in either 1 or 4. And then again, there'd be even 2 possibilities beyond that because D can be 2nd or 3rd. 2nd or 3rd. So that's at least 2 planes flying. Now I say that's at least 2 planes flying, but in fact every plane has to have a qualified pilot. And so C is going to have to be wherever D is. But E and F can pretty much go anywhere right now, and I don't usually love 4 different scenarios, so I'm not going to keep working stuff out. I'm just going to go into these answers and see what's going on. What must be true? Cindy flies with Dave and Ed? Definitely with Dave, but I don't really see why she has to be with Ed. Cindy flies with Ed? Again, for sure, no. Dave flies with Cindy. Yes, that's the one, right? So number 21 is C. Very good. Moving right along, let's take a look at number 22. If Cindy and Fran are the only people in one of the planes, which one of the following must be true? Well, that's pilot, co-pilot, so I don't think there's anything terribly interesting about that, except to say that that means that A and D, who of course we also know have to be separate, can't be in that plane with C and F. And so, in fact, in this case, we must have 3 planes, so we have to distribute the 3 pilots. So, again, I think there are too many scenarios to work that out precisely, but you could easily imagine something like I guess you could say B does have to be with D, and then C, of course, has to go with F, and so that means that A has to go with E. But the AE block could go either 1st or 4th. The BD block could go 2nd or 3rd, and then CF is just kind of wherever else, right? So we can switch things around as much as we want within the rules, but these have to be the pairings of people. So what did they ask us? What must be true? Bob flies with Anna? No. Dave flies with Ed? No. D and E fly with Bob? That's too many people. D flies with B? Yes, that's the one. All right, so it's got to be D. Number 23, if plane 1 is used, its crew could consist of blank. It's a little confusing here. Do they mean in a single scenario or just who is anyone who could be on the crew? I think they mean in a single scenario. Now, of course, we know Dave can't be on plane 1 ever, so Dave is out. That's D and E. But I don't see Dave on any of the others. So actually, I think that's why it's going to be B here. Okay, I like this. So think about who is not in this list. Like on C, A and D are not on this list. So if everyone, these 4 people, because I do think this is like the crew at one time, not anyone who could be on the crew. If B, C, E, and F are all on plane 1 together, then that means that A and D have to be somewhere else. But D can't fly on his own, and A always ends up in 4, and so is never with D anyway. And so in fact that is impossible on C because we wouldn't be able to, well, for the 2 reasons I just said. In the same way, so C and D are the 2 other possibilities on B. They're the ones who are not in this list right now. Yeah, and now I can see the problem. D and E are the 2 who are not on A, but remember D and E are both co-pilots, so they need a pilot to be flying with them. And since they don't have a pilot, can't be A, has to be B. All right, one more, number 24. If as many of the pilots and co-pilots as possible fly in plane 4, that group will consist of, well, if I'm trying to put as many people as I possibly can on 24, definitely A has to go over there. And of course we know D can't, and D has to be with some pilot. Doesn't really matter if it's B or C. And of course this can go in either slot 2 or 3. But after B or C go there, really it's kind of the same scenario as what we just saw on number 23, because there's really no difference between plane 1 and 4. So clearly 4 people could be on there. We could have A, the other pilot of B and C, and then the 2 co-pilots, E and F. And so that would be exactly 4 people, which is going to be answer choice C. Okay, B, C, D, B, C. B, C, D, B, C. Let's see what we've got. B, C, D, B, C. B, C, D, B, C. We did it. Yay. Well done. What do I think of that section overall? 24 questions, a little bit front-loaded, 19 questions early on, which is nice. I really feel like we would have been able to finish that section in under 35 minutes. Maybe if your pacing is a little bit slower, you're aiming for 2 or 3 games in a typical section. I think that's a solid 3-game section. And in terms of which games you would have done, it's a little iffy. I think you probably could work that one from beginning to end without much difficulty. I wouldn't say I really noticed a huge difference in the difficulties of the game. The last one was a little bit weird in the setup. I suppose looking at it now, I would call it a grouping setup where we just happen to have 4 groups and we don't have to use all the groups. So that does introduce some difficulty. But even then, it's kind of mitigated by the fact that there were only 5 questions and all 5 of them were specific. So we could always just be trying out scenarios, which of course helps us think through what's happening in the game. Anyway, if that is your hardest game in a section, then, that's going to feel pretty good. That's going to be a good section for you. So there it is. First 3 prep tests all done. It's taken me a little longer. I'm definitely not doing 1 per day, but I am trying to get these done pretty regularly. If there is a game you'd like me to move up in the lineups, of course, these tests are quite old. We're talking about 30 years ago. My gosh, I can't believe that. But if there is a more recent game you'd like me to take a look at, please be sure to comment down below, like and subscribe, do all the things that the YouTubers say to do, and I will see y'all around.